Last week we reviewed the best-selling racket in the world. This week we're taking a break from the racket reviews to talk about the best-selling tennis shoe, introducing the brand new Asics Gel-Resolution 10. Hey everybody, it's Luca from Rackets Runners. So I'm really excited for this review. I became a huge fan of the Gel-Resolution 9 in the last couple of years after not really liking gel resolutions in the past. This model really blew me away in terms of all-around performance. So obviously the 10 has really big shoes to fill, and all it takes is one glance at these two and you can tell right away that they went for a pretty drastic redesign. That's brave considering how popular the 9 was, and really it's been Asics' motto to go for subtle changes, but I guess they really wanted to go big since this is the 10th version. I'm also really excited to do more shoe reviews this year. I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I was really big into soccer growing up, and my first nerdy interest was actually soccer shoes, so I really enjoy talking about footwear as well. Considering I've put about 200 hours of play into the last resolution, this was pretty much the perfect model to start doing shoe reviews in 2025. So yeah, I'm really excited, and please don't hesitate to let me know how I can improve these going forward. Now we're going to get into all these technological updates and then move on to how that translates on court. But first, as usual, let me remind you that any of the shoes we talk about on this channel you can check out on our website, racketsandrunners.ca. Also, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me in the store on Instagram, and let me know in the comment section what you want me to cover next. So lots and lots of changes to talk about. We'll start with the most visually obvious. This shoe is quite a bit taller here on the interior side of the ankle collar. Asics is calling this a higher medial collar. Now, it's not quite as high as something like the New Balance Coco CG2, but obviously much taller than the previous Gel-Resolution 9. They're giving us two reasons for this. One, it's supposed to provide a little more ankle support to prevent twisting, but arguably more importantly, as you can see, the collar actually covers up the top medial lace loop. Most of you know that this previous Gel-Resolution was elite for sliding, but the major problem was that this top lace loop was exposed, so after like 3 really big slides, you would break it. Super frustrating issue. I know my coworker Kai was getting really annoyed. He basically had to bring out an arsenal of laces every time he played. I wasn't breaking through them that often, but I did say in my review of the 9 that I hope they would address that issue pretty soon. I know that's excellent news to a lot of you. I will talk about how this impacts fit and comfort in the next section, but now let's move on to another major change, which is to the Dynawall sidewall. I was a huge fan of this sidewall on the 9. It was supportive and stable, but also provided a really solid amount of energy return, while on the 10, you can see here they've beefed it up pretty significantly. It extends much higher and all around the heel portion of the shoe. It's a little bit wider back there as well, and it's more substantial around this 5th metatarsal part of the forefoot. So that's a major update to the shoe's main support system. That, along with this higher ankle collar, you can kind of sense a theme here with the Resolution 10. It's meant to be a beefier shoe in general, and it doesn't stop there. The P-guard rubber material in the forefoot comes up a little bit higher here around the medial toe. This is an area that takes a major beating when you slide. You can see on the previous one, I put a hole through the upper around there, so they've clearly addressed that issue. They've also updated the lacing system. I know it looks quite similar, but this Dynalace piece here is actually much more effective at cinching down on the laces, and we'll talk about why that's important in the fit section later. You can also use these secondary lace loops to tighten down on the upper even more. Now, I really didn't need to, so I didn't actually try it. I feel like this will only be used in very specific situations, but hey, it's there if you want it. The changes don't stop there. Asics has also updated the flight foam in the heel to their newer Flight Foam Blast Eco Foam. Newer equals better, I guess. The major thing is that there is a little bit more of it throughout the heel, which is supposed to help with impact absorption. Then we've got the outsole, which has unsurprisingly also changed. This isn't a super drastic update, but there are a couple things worth noting. There are only 2 pivot points instead of 3 in the forefoot. Then this cutout unit that goes through the middle of the sole is a little bit shorter and shallower. The rest of the pattern also looks different, but honestly, it's just a different take on a very similar design. Now, believe it or not, there is another very important change. They've actually updated the shoe's last. I'm going to move on to fit and comfort now to explain exactly how they've changed it and how that impacts the fit. Because of the new last, this shoe has a very different fit to the previous Gel-Resolution, and whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'll leave it up to you, but here's what you should expect. I'm usually a size 9.5, but there are some shoes where I have to go up to a 10, and the Gel-Resolution 9 was one of those. Resolutions have always had quite a unique fit to them, where they're actually pretty narrow around this 5th metatarsal area, and then taper off into quite a pointy toe box. I've always had to go up half a size because of that narrower width, which is why I didn't always love gel resolutions, but they've gone away from that design with this new one. This is cut more similarly to the Court FF, which has a more standard last, you could say, where it's wider in that forefoot around the 5th metatarsal, and then doesn't have that same really pointy toe box. Now naturally, I initially grabbed a size 10 because of my history with the gel resolution, but right away, because it is wider up here, I was swimming around in the shoe, so I would highly recommend that you go down half a size compared to the 9, and even if you're coming from the 8. Even the size 9.5 that I'm holding here fits wider than the size 10 that I've been using with the Gel Resolution 9. I know there's a lot of 9s and 10s and 9.5s in there. I know, I'm sorry, it's super confusing. Also, don't worry about it being too short if you go down a half size. I've always found there to be a bit too much dead space with older resolutions. To me, this toe box was always awkwardly long, kind of like a court jester shoe, especially with the way it raises up here. I think they were designed this way to prevent toe jam, since that does give your foot a little bit more room to move forward, but I had zero issues with toe jam on this new one, and I do think this fit will work better for more people. Now let's move on to the heel, because adding a bunch of material to the medial part of the ankle collar obviously changes the way it fits back here. You certainly feel the extra material, but it doesn't really hold your foot down any better. In fact, because it's higher, it doesn't compress right below your ankle bone like more standard cut shoes, so it does feel a little bit awkward. I would say it does have a slightly more sloppy fit. You definitely won't be swimming around in the shoe, but it's not that same super locked in and secure fit that I had with the 9. Now remember, I'm comparing the new one in a size 9.5 to the previous one in a size 10, and I'm saying the new one actually feels roomier, so again, I would highly recommend going down that half size. Now moving on to the fit in the midfoot, it's kind of the same story. It does feel like you have quite a bit more room in here, especially before you tie the laces down. The thing is, because this lacing system is so effective at cinching down on the upper, you do eventually feel like you can get almost as snug of a fit as on the 9. To me, this new lacing system is crucial to the overall experience here. There is more volume pretty consistently throughout the whole shoe compared to the 9, so if you do want to get close to that snug fit you had with that shoe, you do need to take advantage of these laces. Now when you hear that a shoe has more volume, you're probably thinking, great, more comfort as well, and to a certain extent that's true, especially because I do think this shoe is going to be more comfortable for a wider variety of foot shapes because of this new last. The one thing I'll say is that the previous Resolution had a remarkably soft upper considering it was full rubber, and because it was so soft, once it broke in, it was super comfortable. They've stiffened up the rubber pretty significantly on this new one, so it's not that same type of rubber that's going to become buttery soft and adapt really well to your foot. It holds its shape a lot more, so yes, the fit is roomier right out of the box, but I actually think the 9 was so comfortable after a little bit of break-in, so it's really hard to say if one is point blank more comfortable than the other. They're both comfortable, the 9 in more of a softer slipper type of way, and this new one in that there are zero pressure points whatsoever, but it also won't feel quite as adapted to your foot in the long run. Now there is an important reason for why they've stiffened up the upper on the Resolution X. One of the issues with the softer upper on the 9 is that it did wear out somewhat quickly for this style of shoe. We will talk about that durability more at the end, because that's one area this shoe has improved massively. But first I want to talk about lockdown, support, and stability, because this is a gel resolution. That's probably the most important part of its playability. Support and stability are one thing. Technically they're two things, but I want to talk about lockdown separate from support and stability for a second. So support and stability are one thing over here, but great lockdown is how a lot of those more comfort and speed oriented shoes still make you feel super secure despite not having as much support and stability in the traditional sense. The Resolution 9 had what I considered to be a near perfect blend of the two, where its lockdown was up there with the very best shoes on the market, and support and stability was fantastic, although maybe not quite as intense as something like a Barricade or Court FF. I have to say, the Resolution 10 doesn't have that same Loctite fit that we had on the 9. Your foot definitely moves around a little bit more because of the shoe's boxier cut and because of the more awkward fit in the heel that I was talking about earlier. The important thing to understand here is that a shoe might not have the best lockdown, but it can still have a ton of support and stability, and that's exactly what you get on the Gel Resolution X compared to the 9. Less lockdown, more support. All these updates that I mentioned earlier, especially this Dynawall sidewall, make it feel more like a traditional support and stability shoe. You get more of that sturdy wall backing you up when you make lateral cuts, and you also feel that because the upper is stiffer, you're not rolling over quite as much, Although again, this was not really a problem on the Resolution 9, it's just more obvious now with this new one. Also, the taller portion around the medial part of your ankle does make it feel like there's a bit more shoe there to support you, despite the fit not being as seamless as it was on the 9, and then the extra dyno wall around the heel adds to that supportive feel back there. Then you've got the outsole, and I didn't really mention this as one of the changes, but it's linked to this new wider last. The outsole itself is quite a bit wider than it was on the previous Resolution. This is true all throughout the shoe, but especially in the heel and the forefoot. You might not be able to see on camera, but I'll show you anyways. You can see it splays out quite a bit more up here. A wider platform like this makes for a much more stable sensation below your feet, so this is clearly a shoe that's intended to be more of an all-out stability option compared to the 9. Now we have to talk about another change, and that's the stance the shoe actually puts you in, which is dependent on how the outsole is angled or not angled. The Gel Resolution 9 and pretty much every other Gel Resolution I can think of had quite a neutral stance to them, no angle inwards, definitely no angle outwards, and they had a pretty neutral drop as well. That was a pretty weird sensation for me when I started using the Gel Resolution 9 because I had worn Nike Vapors for most of my tennis career, and the Vapor is known for angling you in quite a bit. The new Resolution 10 puts you in a much more similar stance to the Vapor. You can definitely feel it pushing you in a little bit, and the reason some shoes do this is because it automatically puts you in the ready position. That definitely adds to this shoe feeling more stable and grounded, but it also takes away from that really quick, nimble, and reactive feel. I'm going to talk in more detail now about how this all translates to movement around the court because, as you can imagine, with all these changes, it is quite different to the 9. Like I've said a few times now, Asics has clearly designed this new Resolution 10 to be a much more traditional stability and support shoe. Now you might hear that and think, well, hasn't the Gel Resolution always been a support and stability shoe? And yes, support and stability were still great on the Gel Resolution 9, but that shoe was definitely more of a modern, inventive take on the stability style of shoe. That's part of the reason why I liked it so much. It felt like they'd created such a cohesive blend of stability, comfort, and speed, but it also didn't go all the way in one direction. You don't have that same really unique modern feel on this one. That's just the reality. In some ways, it feels like they've taken a step back in time, but don't think of that as necessarily a bad thing. You're more grounded, planted, and stable, and for a lot of players, that's going to feel like a positive because it increases your sensation of stability and support. It's more of a rock-solid shoe that complements proper tennis footwork, but doesn't excel as much when you're scrambling or getting into more random situations around the court. We also have to talk about weight, because with all these beefier updates, it has gone up quite a bit, which also takes away from that more nimble feel of the previous one. If we're looking at the same size, the weight has gone up by about 40 grams to 435 grams in a size 9.5. But keep in mind, you should go down half a size compared to the previous one. If we compare a size 10 to a 9.5, it does get a lot closer, 435 grams compared to 420, so it is still a little bit heavier, which does make sense considering it has become a bit more stability and support oriented. Now, more weight and more shoe, that has its pros and cons, and I'll explain who I think this shoe is made for here in a second. But one major benefit that this new Resolution X has over the previous one is durability. It was clearly a major point of emphasis with this redesign. Now, quick reminder, I can't exactly put my tennis shoes through intense wear these days because of my ankle, but everything about this shoe is meant to be more durable. The stiffer upper is going to hold its structure better, that's a guarantee. It's also not going to wear out as quickly if it does drag on the floor. And then this P-guard section right here is perfectly placed to stop this from happening. Also, I said this earlier, but this raised medial collar addresses an issue that so many players had with the 9, and you're never going to have to worry about busting through your laces with this one. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I was totally fine with the durability on the Resolution 9, but take that with a bit of a pinch of salt. I can swap out my shoes pretty much whenever I want. The reality is, durability was subpar compared to what gel resolutions are supposed to represent. Making it more durable does make it more resolution in that sense, so that will be beneficial to most players in the long run, especially once you take value into account. To me, this new Resolution 10 is a fascinating redesign because it really goes away from everything we thought we knew with Asics with their subtle, methodical improvements every time they release a new resolution. There's nothing subtle here, and because of that, I can't really say that it's going to be a seamless transition for those of you who want to switch, but again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. This is more of a traditional stability shoe that has lost a bit of that unicorn modern magic the 9 had, but I think it might actually end up being more popular because of the more universal fit and especially because of the better durability. I also have to say, it's not like it's lost all of that innovation that made the 9 so special. The Dynawall sidewall still provides a really impressive amount of energy return, and the Flight Foam and gel cushioning combine to make impact feel much lighter than what stability shoes have felt like in the past, so it's still innovative, just not quite as much as the 9. If you like the previous Resolution, but you were frustrated by its slight lack of durability, especially if you're a big slider, the changes here should make you very happy. Also, if you felt like the 9 didn't give you quite enough support, but you also don't like how intense the Cord FF feels on foot, this is a really good in-between, but still much closer to the previous Resolution. Personally, I'm not gonna lie, it is going to take me a bit of time to adapt, just because I was such a big fan of the 9, but I really enjoyed this playtest. I think this is the perfect shoe for me right now, since it does provide a bit more support, especially in that ankle area. If I ever get to slide on a tennis court again, which I really hope I can do because it's a heck of a lot of fun, I will test how this shoe is for sliding a little bit better, but I would assume it is very good because all these durability changes have pretty much directly targeted those high wear zones when you slide. With that said, that is going to be the end of this review. Thank you so much for watching, and remember that if you want to try on the brand new Gel-Resolution X, you can come visit our awesome shoe fitters in store, or if you want to buy it, you can go online at racketsandrunners.ca.